mortality no longer feels like some abstraction that I could push away to the age of 80 or 90, or there's no longer a luxury of pushing the idea of mortality away. And what's difficult is living in a society that's never been able to deal with death unless they own it in the form of weaponry or control or assassination or murder. And most people I know seem to not be able to help but continually abstract notions of death, or most people I know can never even speak the words death. And given that the effects of this disease hasn't really begun to show itself externally for me, I find that if I run into people that I know and they ask me how I feel, and if I feel really terrible and I tell them that, the common response is, "Oh, but you look great." Almost as if that means, well, I'm not going to disappear, I'm not going to die immediately, so therefore they can avoid the whole notion of illness and death, or abstract it to a later point. Most of the people that I've known or been friendly with over the years, I don't bother to associate with anymore because of what I feel is their response to this epidemic, or to the response, their lack of response to the idea of mortality itself, the fact that they can't deal with it, have the luxury to not deal with it for the moment. And I just find it too odd or frustrating to care to experience the reflection of my slow illness and death in their eyes, or in their lack of response. And I have a friend who died about a month and a half ago from AIDS, and towards the end of his life, he would sit at my table and just say, "I hate healthy people. I just hate healthy people." And I really understood it wasn't a shocking statement. It's people with some relative degree of health. Not all people, but most people just tend to abstract mortality, thinking that somehow it's something they'll have to deal with when they're, in their 70s or 80s. And here we are in our 20s and 30s and 40s, dealing with this loss and dealing with this sense of mortality around us and inside of us. So to be at a relatively young age and be witnessing so much death and to be experiencing so much death, sets off, I guess, emotions that would lead somebody to say that they hate healthy people. I'm still trying to acclimate myself to the idea of my own death, but it's more that my sense of what life is has slowly been emptying out, so that things like reason are really difficult things to arrive at this point. I find that ideas of reason for living, reason for making things, reason for communication, are slowly becoming like a void or one big blank, and something of just emptiness. It's like seeing the functionings of the world, through the window or walking down the street occasionally, and those functions or those movements of other people and other, of the little particulars of the structure of the society just lose, again, meaning or reason. Or they become less and less meaningful, or it's something about stopping, or no longer being able to create and sustain a direction for myself, or some abstract point in what we call future, to move towards. Things just touch me less and less, and all the semblances of living that people do or create or enact somehow become more and more empty. I mean, I would prefer that people speak the word death and acknowledge the death that comes along with this disease. I mean, we're not all, you know, asymptomatic muscle boys and kickboxing dykes, you know, fighting this epidemic. There is, you know, there's a tendency in the face of media images of AIDS, you know, that we've been fed over the years. There's a tendency to try to fight those images so that there were created statements like people living with AIDS, people fighting with AIDS, you know, which I find nothing wrong with, and I agree with trying to dismantle those media images, but then I think at times in the activist community that there's a tendency to go into total denial about death, which a society has always done anyways. I mean, I always felt as a teenager and growing up that if this society even could for 5 minutes deal with mortality on a coast-to-coast level, I mean, in education and, you know, our institutions and our schools, then most of us would never be doing the things that we're doing, that we wouldn't care to live in and support the social structure if we really understood something about our mortality. And to leave the bed of a friend who can't even put a spoon in his own mouth and then go to some public gathering where somebody makes a statement that AIDS is not about death is outrageous to me. It's no less outrageous than what common media will do. I guess the problem is to find a way of expressing the effects of this epidemic that gather in all aspects of it, not just singling out certain aspects like people living with AIDS. You know, it's people living with AIDS and people dying of AIDS. And that's the whole point of fighting this epidemic and trying to educate public. I think, you know, it brings up other issues too, you know, that I've experienced over the last 7-8 years of buzzwords like courage and strength, that he or she was so courageous as they came to their death, or he or she had so much strength, and they're just buzzwords for politeness. And I'm not going to crawl into the media grave of AIDS and just die courageously or politely. You know, I have no desire to be polite in the face of being slowly murdered. Well, I know that I'm not, you know, if I die, I'm not going to die simply because I got fucked in the ass without a condom or swallowed some stranger's cum. I know that I'm going to die because of the way this disease has been handled by those in positions of power. And I would say that they're the owners of newspapers, the owners of TV stations, owners of radio, all members of organized religion that have failed to address this epidemic because they prefer to maintain that this disease has a moral code and a sexual orientation, and that to them is makes these people who are dying of this disease or affected by this disease expendable. And also politicians, the formation of a soundbite culture in terms of information. It's really those in positions of power in this country that are responsible for the way this disease is spreading and killing. There seems to be this sort of aversion to anger, and it's not just, I mean, just in society in general. Anger gets the same treatment as mortality, which is people just go into denial about it, or somehow anger as an emotion is yet another taboo in this country, that we should suppress our anger, or we shouldn't speak angrily, or we shouldn't. It's the same thing as, you know, the courage or strength being buzzwords for polite, that one should act polite in the face of being slowly murdered. Anger is an emotion that I think is extremely valuable. It's a transitory emotion. it's something that leads you out of one place into another, whether it's out of inactivity into activity. And it somehow catalyzes a series of reactions to events that one experiences or one contains or one carries. I've had people try to explain away some of the things that I've said or done by saying, oh, he's angry because he has AIDS. And I don't think you need to be carrying this virus to have a reaction to how this epidemic has been handled. I think everybody has a right to be angry, and I feel like I've come to a place in my life that if people prefer to see me as a monster at times because of what they witness of my anger, then I prefer to be seen as a monster. It's actually comforting because it just gives me more room and allows me more room to express the range of things that I feel. If I come to a place where I feel hate, or if I come to a place where I feel outrage, or where I feel rage itself, and that starts translating itself into activities, I think that's perfectly good for myself. It's where I am, it's what I see and perceive and respond to and how I respond. It's, rage is a really interesting tool to dismantle this whole illusion of things like one tribe nation or general public or what's acceptable or not acceptable. I mean, the things that I loved in experiences of activism were not so much the media revolutionaries or the photogenic revolutionaries or activists who, most get attention or press or airtime on, some spot on the TV news. It's the people that I'm most enthralled by are who I feel the most responsive to is like the lesbian waitress from New Jersey who, with her frightened girlfriend, are for the first time laying their body on the line where they're choosing to get arrested. And what I love about them and what I'm really impressed with about those people like that, the ones who are not really celebrated by media or photogenic enough for media, is that they actually are approaching a wall of illusions called law, and they're dismantling that wall for the first time in their lives by realizing that they don't have to participate in that illusion of law in terms of what's right or what's wrong, and that they're actually beginning to dismantle that wall of illusion. And once you cross that line, you realize like these religious institutions, these public buildings, these public institutions, the institutions of government, you realize they're just made of stone, or a series of stones placed together. You realize that these people, especially those responsible for this epidemic, those who are who most affect the course of this epidemic because of their bigotry posing as virtue, you realize that they're just made of blood and muscle and bones, and that those buildings and those people can be dismantled just as easily as anything else once you break through that wall of illusion called law. I have no traditional moral reaction to the idea of murder in terms of what I was fed growing up in this society. I mean, I don't see the slow murder of myself and the people I love as being any more acceptable or less acceptable than the murder of others in order to either protect ourselves or to take revenge. And the only thing that ever occurs to me in those thoughts of murder is wondering if the planet will spin a little bit faster once these people are gone.